So, dear colleagues from different countries around the world, very welcome to this webinar hosted by EWORA and IAU during the ongoing International Women's Week. And the title of the webinar is Gender Equality in Higher Education and Research, Strategies for Empowerment. Dear International Association of Universities, IAU, dear Secretary General Dr. Hilleges van Land, for our unique partnership between IAU and European Women Rectors Association, EWORA. There is a need for good partnership in the world right now. And as the president of EWORA, I really appreciate our friendship and shared interest in gender equality, diversity, and inclusion, but also how to build good leadership in academia. We can do a lot together, and thank you IAU for hosting this important webinar together with EWORA, which is a small and independent and network-based organization. In universities around the world, high academic quality in both education and research are an overarching goal. The knowledge we produce through education and research should be research-based, but also relevant to society at large. Our researchers produce knowledge with a short-term or long-term societal impact, contributing to a more sustainable society. Our research is incorporated in our educational programs, and our students are the future change makers in society. And to reach the goal of high academic quality, we need to cultivate academic leadership and culture. Incorporating strategies for gender equality, diversity, and inclusion is important when cultivating academic culture and quality. In today's webinar, during the International Women's Week, we will focus on strategies for empowerment within academia, but also outside academia, since our students, alumni, and staff also are citizens, and hopefully global citizens. Today, the speakers will present and share different views, perspectives, and experiences on gender equality in higher education and research, and about strategies for empowerment. And once again, very welcome to this webinar. And now I hand over to Hilleges van Land. Thank you. Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Kirsten Tam, for this very good opening and focusing a lot on what empowerment actually means. How will we be able to cultivate academic leadership? How will we be able to cultivate a better academic culture? And how all of this will contribute to high quality higher education? The strategies for empowerment, I will invite all the speakers to speak to a little bit more. So indeed, we're extremely pleased with this cooperation, very strong cooperation with the European Women Rectors Association and the International Association of Universities. It's an honor and pleasure for so many years to host joint webinars and to really have a unique opportunity with speakers from around the world of very high quality to address themes that pertain to the broader agenda of women empowerment. If we look at the International Women's Day 2025, it is a part and parcel of a long series of International Women's Days, and we celebrate this during a whole week, and we should celebrate this during the whole year. But this is a global day that is celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women inside academia and way beyond. The theme for 2025 is Let's Accelerate Action for Women's Capacity. And we know we're far from reaching any kind of gender parity. We also know that this is at risk these days and that we need to strengthen our cooperation in order to ensure, maybe not parity so much, but to work strongly towards empowering women, moving us into the future. So the UN Women calls for more rights, for more equality, for more empowerment, as you said, for 2025. And that's why by joining forces between such a strong network as the European Women Rectors Association and the Global Association of Universities that the IAU is representing, we believe that we can help advance thinking about the best strategies to empower. During this panel presentation, the experts will share with us different views on how to challenge the status quo, how to innovate, provide new policies and institutional approaches, how to also help find new collaboration opportunities across the institution, with the institution and the outside world, and across the globe. It is also an opportunity to look at support mechanisms for academics and for staff, for students, and to look at how research, and in particular, interdisciplinary research and partnerships at the level of the institution as a whole, how these can help develop the kind of strategies that we need for today and for tomorrow. In the context of the IAU, this is directly related also to the work that we do on higher education and research for sustainable development, where since 2018, we've developed a global cluster on higher education and research for sustainable development, in which SDG 4, quality education and quality higher education, is at the heart. But it actually is entirely linked to all the other SDGs, and in particular, the Sustainable Development Goal 5 for more quality and equity education for women and with women. So we're very pleased to welcome to the table today, to the virtual table. We're very pleased to invite 5 esteemed speakers from around the world, and I will first introduce you as a group. We will be hearing from Laura Gailey, who's the Associate Project Officer, Science, Technology and Innovation Policy at UNESCO. We're very pleased to welcome Pamela Gillis, the board member of EWORA and former Vice Chancellor of Glasgow Caledonian University, Scotland in the UK. We're very pleased then to give the floor to Shingarande Sunungurai, who's Director of Women's University in Africa, Zimbabwe, and an IAU board member. Anders Söderholm, the president of KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, will next take the floor from Sweden. And last but not least, we will give the floor to Sabrine Yassine, who's the steering committee member of the Global Student Forum. So I think we have a lot to learn from you, and I'm very pleased to give you the floor and open the conversation with a few input ideas into a conversation, and then we will proceed to a conversation between the different perspectives you will bring to the floor. Thank you. So I will start by giving the floor to Laura Gailey. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen for a very few slides. Do you see my slides correctly? Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the invitation today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you in advance of the International Women's Day, but as you said, I think we should celebrate it every single day. So my name is Laura Gailey, and I work at UNESCO headquarters in Paris as an associate project officer in the Science, Technology, Innovation Policy, but more specifically on all the work related to gender equality in science. And even more specifically on the call to action that you can see on the left, that is called Closing the Gender Gap in Science. and I work on its implementation since last year when we launched it. And so I just want to say a few words about this call to action before we dive into the discussion where I can explain a bit further. But about UNESCO's work in general on gender in science, we really try to take a holistic approach to advance gender equality in science. What do I mean, a holistic approach? So to give you an example, this call to action is really based on 3 pillars, and we're actually working around these 3 pillars. So you can see the 3 pillars on the right. The first one is really about initiatives helping to increase the visibility of female role models to actually dismantle gender stereotypes and biases. So this is more at the societal level. And then the second pillar we're working on is about implementing educational strategies and initiatives to work more on the educational level and actually open pathways for girls in science and, inspire them and make them realize that this is a great career to pursue. And then the third pillar is much more about the workplace environment and creating an empowering workplace environment that doesn't only attract women scientists to the workplace, but also make sure that they retain there and that they can also advance in leadership positions throughout their career. And this is through new policies, new actions that promote diversity, equity, inclusion. And so these are a bit the 3 pillars that we're working around. And just to give you a few ideas of initiatives, I couldn't put all the initiatives on the slide, so I tried to put a few of them. But you can see a few work that we're doing here at UNESCO in Paris and abroad to our field offices. So for example, we have the L'Oréal UNESCO for Women in Science program, where we reward women scientists, younger ones, more accomplished ones, through awards, endowments, prizes, but also creating a community around it. And this, I'll be happy to talk more about it during the discussion. Then we also have some initiatives more specific at the national level. So for example, we have one in Peru, which is about sharing stories of women scientists who work in a biosphere reserves in Manu in Peru, and just sharing their stories as well that are really inspiring. We also work with schools and with teachers, parents, students in different places around the world. This picture, I think, was taken in Brazil, below on the left, where we also have through activities, some workshops, some games, also providing role models. We also work through communication campaigns. So you might have seen the one with More Women in Science with the hashtag Every Voice in Science that was launched a few days ago for the International Day of Women Girls in Science. We also work on media coaching for women scientists because we realize that we are really influenced by what we see in the media. And then on the other side, we have all the publications. So on the bottom, you can see 5 of them. So some of the publications are really work done in the context of UNESCO only. Others, for example, the Changing the Equation and Uncharted Waters, it was done in the context of G20, because it also happens that member states, countries come to us and then we do case studies about different initiatives around the world. And last but not least, we also work on developing policy recommendations or also gathering best practices. And so there is also this hub that we launched a few weeks ago where you have a world map and you can click on different countries and see different initiatives that, individuals, NGOs, universities, private sector, public sector, they have been implementing. And then you can click on these different little icons on the maps and actually learn more about the initiative, so that you can, if you're interested in collaborating, but also maybe replicating a similar initiative somewhere else. That's really also the idea, to just gather a community around it and really a network where we can learn from each other. So that's a bit UNESCO's work. We also have a work on displaced women scientists and actually providing scholarships in high quality universities in the Global South for displaced women. So you can see it's really a holistic approach, very different initiatives, but all adding to each other. And then I'm really happy to talk more about these initiatives. Last slide, this is how you can join us. There is this LinkedIn group that you can scan, that you can join us. We have over 1,500 members now. And if you want to share your initiatives, you can scan the QR code on the right. And yeah, happy to talk more about it throughout the discussion.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is very impressive. And what I already get from here, that empowerment has a lot to do with awareness raising, communication about issues, and making it known, also inspire. So that's the other part. So without further ado, let's see what Pamela Gillis, board member EWORA and former Vice Chancellor of Glasgow Caledonian University, will share with us in the next 5 minutes, to also see where we complement or diverge when it comes to strategies and of empowerment. Pamela, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. And I was a Vice Chancellor for 17 years and currently chair the charity The Circle, founded by Annie Lennox to promote women's organisations around the world. So important at a time when aid is being cut, especially for women. And that has relevance to the talk today. We all know the famous phrase from Peter Drucker that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Without enabling cultures, strategies often struggle to be successfully implemented in any organisation. And the board of EWORA recently reviewed available evidence on gender equality in higher education and harnessed the leadership narratives of many years of experience of current vice-chancellors, rectors and presidents, and concluded we needed to focus on 3 broad areas if we were to advance gender equality at more than the snail pace that currently happens. But we decided culture is important. Firstly, governance. Now, it's not a dry, dull area, I promise. It's of major importance in increasing gender equality across diverse institutions. And we believe that by implementing strategy and engaging in accountability through measurement of key aspects of gender equality over time, by boards of governors, trustees and directors. By this means, we may fast forward change. As Marilyn Waring, the New Zealand economist, has noted, we decide to measure now what we prioritise in future. Evidence is necessary, but not sufficient for change without some kind of accountability. Let me give you an example from my previous university, Glasgow Caledonian University, which fully embraced values-led culture and distributed leadership, implemented policies and practices to promote gender equality, and measured outcomes, which we reported annually to all staff and to the board. So over the period of my tenure, which ended 2 years ago, we established a research strategy guided by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we established this in 2017, one of the very first universities to do so. We reduced the gender pay gap across all academic and staff roles and reduced it to 0 for many. We tracked and reported promotion applications and success by gender. We established females in more than 40% of professorial posts, and 50% of all our leadership roles were female. We had a balanced gender profile on executive and board of governors, and a long-standing campaign against gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the university called Erase the Grey, designed by students as well as staff and promoted through many universities across the UK. And this approach was externally validated by the Times Higher Global Impact League Table. For SDG 5 on gender equality in 2019, when the table started, GCU was 12th in the world for gender equality, 5th in 2020, 5th in 2021, 4th in 2022, but had dropped after I left in 2023 to 97th, before recovering slightly to 38th in 2024. So progress in gender equality is not necessarily linear. It can go up and down, and maintenance requires vigilance and transparent accountability. EWORA intends to provide briefings for boards on these important points. Secondly, we need to share our stories, raising awareness, giving support, building networks. Higher education really does promote gender equality through publishing its research, mentoring, networking, training, including excellent programmes like the Magna Carta Observatory's Living Values initiatives, the Athena Swan and Aurora programmes, EWORA's own leadership programmes and conferences, and through our advocacy and lobbying, and also, we believe, working with male allies and adopting a strategic approach to artificial intelligence. And as our moderators said, sharing stories about sustaining female leadership is clearly important at the present time. As we've noted recently, in the autumn of 2023, 6 of the 8 Ivy League universities in the USA had women presidents, including the first ever Black president at Harvard, Claudine Gay. 1 year later, 3 had been forced to resign at Harvard, Pennsylvania, and Columbia, and a further President Cornell retired early. So shared narratives of success and challenges that women have to overcome, and to do these in safe environments, are certainly needed. And we believe EWORA is one of the safe havens where this support can be found. But it's also equally important to share stories of the journeys of female research academics in the early stages of their careers, charting their progress and helping women build and engage in influential academic and research networks. Last but not least, values-led leadership. We strongly contend that universities and indeed societies around the world are desperately in need of values-led leadership at the present time, which takes as its point of departure academic values, democratic principles and human rights, thereby promoting and enhancing gender equality, inclusion and diversity. We need to speak this truth to power boldly for the common good and for the protection of the future of our universities and the enormous benefits they bring to our societies. Mary Robinson, past President of Ireland, recently said that where women lead, action follows. EWORA is fully committed to raising our voice very loudly indeed to lobby for values-led leadership, nourishing a positive culture in universities for the advancement of gender equality, which of course brings me back to where I started. Culture matters. Thank you.
This is absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Pamela. It is beautiful, very strong, and definitely leading us in the way of looking at this connect where Kirsten started, the importance of research. So evidence is necessary, accountability as well, and this values-led leadership in order to ensure that not only we advance, but that the advancements made are continuing way into the future, and that we need to raise awareness, to build networks, to train, to continue the work, to never let go. So let's see what Professor Sunungurai Dominica Shingarande would like to add to this from an African perspective and the Women's University in Zimbabwe. So Sunungurai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elig, and a warm welcome, everyone. I will speak specifically about Women's University in Africa and the strategies that the university has put in place to ensure empowerment of women and promoting gender equality. The university was established in 2002 following a series of measures that the government of Zimbabwe had actually put in place to promote women empowerment and in particular access to higher education by the girl child through affirmative action is one of the measures. Not much was realized from the affirmative action measures. That's why the government then approved the establishment of Women's University in Africa. The university has a policy of promoting women empowerment. So one of the measures that the university has put in place is to ensure that within its enrollment, the target of 85% women is met. So there's a quota for women in enrollment, that's 85%. And 15% for men. But beyond that, the university has also tried to ensure that there is a female leadership within the university structures. So the university council chairperson is female, the board chairperson is female, the vice chancellor and her vice are female, the student representative council president is also female. So that is also university policy to ensure that there is representation of women in decision-making bodies. We also have 3 faculties at the moment, and 2 of them are led by women as deans. the majority of the directors in the institution are also women. So these are some of the measures that have been put in place. But the thrust of the university is to promote a female or a gender responsive institution. So to inform that, there was need for the university to conduct a gender audit. So I'll talk about the gender audit as one of the mechanisms that the university has actually put in place to ensure that it responds to the needs and priorities and interests of the various stakeholders within the institution. So a gender audit was conducted, and a gender mainstreaming strategy and action plan was also developed to inform whatever recommendations that came out of the gender audit, so that the measures are actually informed by the research that was actually conducted. So as a result of that gender audit, quite a number of gaps were actually established within the institution, and measures were actually then developed and implemented to ensure a gender responsive institution. Some of the issues that came through were that men and women from society have got different roles and responsibilities, and those roles and responsibilities follow them even when they come to the university as staff members and also as students. So the university established an early childhood development center, at least to support female staff members who have got kids that require support at the daycare center. So we realized that some of our staff members, and including female students, in some cases they miss duties as a result of emergencies that relate to childcare. So the daycare center has different fee structures. It has a fee structure for women that have got a one-day emergency, where, for example, the maid has gone for off day and does not come back on time. So the fee structure is flexible to allow different emergencies that women actually face regarding childcare. We also have a nursing mothers lounge at the university. We have also established flexible learning models. We have evening classes, we have day classes, we have holiday classes, we have weekend classes, we have block classes, we have online, we have a blended approach. So all those are meant to accommodate different kinds of female students with different responsibilities that come with being women. So that's another measure that the university has actually come up with. We have also realized that the majority of the interventions that are meant to promote gender equality have targeted students by, in some cases, introducing a gender module, but we have not done much to educate our staff members on these issues. So we have come up with a mechanism to ensure that as policy, within 2 weeks of employment, a staff member should undergo gender training. So that has actually improved the levels of awareness on gender issues amongst our staff members. But we have gone further to say for our academics, we need to also introduce gender responsive pedagogy training. So that's also part of our staff development programs in the university for our academics. We have also introduced gender responsive budgeting in the institution, where we specifically budget for gender issues within the university. We also do gender responsive procurement. Whenever our procurement is going out for procurement of furniture or assets or whatever, we also ensure that there's a gender lens to whatever is being procured within the institution, so that we promote a gender responsive institution and we have gender responsive infrastructure. We have also ensured that work-life balance is promoted within the institution. We have introduced paternity leave. Even within Zimbabwe as a country, our labor law has not, or is still silent on paternity leave. But as an institution, we have realized that this is critical as women's university in Africa, we should be seen to be trailblazing on some of these issues. So we've actually introduced paternity leave. We have also introduced a bridging mathematics program to ensure that those females that would want to enroll for science programs that require mathematics at ordinary level, we have provided that as a facility, and they find it then easy for them to get into mathematics and then to science disciplines. So that's a measure that we have also introduced. And finally, we have a STEM center in the university. So apart from a bridging mathematics program, we have also said we have few females taking up STEM disciplines. So we should play a critical role to provide mentorship through the STEM center. So we have a laboratory, we have mentors at that STEM laboratory, and we have also invited female high school students for them to come for mentorship programs, for them also to be motivated into getting into STEM disciplines through this STEM center. So the STEM center is acting as a bridge between high school and university to build interest and motivate female students to get into science disciplines by demystifying STEM disciplines at that center. So that's how I would end my submission. Over to you, Hilij. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is very nice to see this sequencing where actually your presentation echoes one of the key points that Pamela Gillis was making. Culture matters. And so a culture of an institution matters. And if you lead by example, that's where change will definitely come into play and will be promoted and empowerment can take place. It's interesting also this very strong support for research through audits and the importance of policies. So without further ado, let's hear from Anders Söderholm, who's the president of KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, and your points as well when it comes to these important points of women empowerment.
Thank you. And thank you for having been invited to the seminar today. It's a very timely topic, I must say. As you were saying, I'm the president of KTH, which is a university with a focus on engineering education and STEM research. And based on our profile, we of course share some general equality challenges with other universities having a similar focus. And there are also continuous efforts to increase widening participation and inclusion on campus. I would like, however, to use my 5 minutes for another angle on this topic. First, let me say our vision is to take the lead for a sustainable society. We consider it to be a bold vision, including striving for the highest quality in education and research, of course. But there are two horizontal policy areas underpinning our work that need to be present both in everyday life and in all development efforts on campus. First, we need to have a profound understanding that all we do have an impact on the sustainability of the society, and that we need to navigate to make the world a better place by always taking sustainability issues seriously. And second, equality, diversity, and inclusion in all our operations need to be a focus throughout the university. We want to attract talent from across the globe representing many various backgrounds and experiences. We want to be a safe place for all our students and staff, and we want our education and research to include equality aspects. And these two policy areas, sustainability and gender equality, we are considering them as core values on which we build all our research and educational portfolios. Today, however, both these areas, sustainability and gender equality, are challenged from several sides in society. Alternative facts are taken into account when questioning the ongoing climate crisis. Striving for gender balance is seen as a way of replacing merit-based recruitment with quotas and non-merit criteria. One line of argument assumes that equality, inclusion, and diversity are part of a so-called woke movement, where universities are politicized and led into an increasingly narrow corridor of opinion, where there will be soon only be room for one opinion. for example, that gender equality will be prioritized over and instead of quality in research and education. Another line of argument points out universities as places where we do not take into account people's identity and specific background, but not defining political and identity political aspects of research and education. Therefore, we will systematically treat groups of employees and students unequally, but at the same time claim that we do not. And these two lines of argument are attacking sustainability and gender equality, but from different points of view. Open academic discourse and academic freedom are then challenged from several different sides. I think an obvious risk is that we as representatives of university management become silent and choose the path that creates the least criticism and where we do not risk being attacked from any side. But I think we must do exactly the opposite. It is now, in times of unrest and uncertainty, that we must stand up for fundamental values that should be fundamental also for a modern university and a modern society. Therefore, normally I would say, don't talk so much, do the work instead. But today I would like to say, don't just do the right things, talk about it too, and make it clear that you also stand firmly for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Excellent. Wow. So it gets better by the minute, and the connect and the connecting points are really very interesting. So this dual pillar on sustainable development and gender equality echoes many of the other points that were made in just in a different angle. Very interesting to hear this strong focus also on the importance of really stressing the core values upon which to develop a high quality university as places where people feel safe, where they have the opportunity to develop, where they have the opportunity to grow and to serve society much better. Because in the end, as you say, universities need to contribute to making the world a better place. And indeed, these points that are so eloquently stressed by all of the speakers until now are under threat, and we need to speak up. So on the one hand, you say, don't speak, act, but let's act and speak. So that's definitely very important for us to have these conversations in which we can make these strong points moving forward. So model universities, model society, lead by example. Where does that bring you into the conversation, Sabrine Yassine, steering member of the steering committee at the Global Student Forum? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me here to speak. That was very inspiring from Anders, so I'm going to follow that up. I'm here just to give a bit of the student perspective and some practical examples of things we've worked on in the Global Student Forum. So my name is Sabrine. I'm from Australia, and I sit on the Global Student Forum as a steering committee member. So it is nighttime for me here, opposite of all of you guys. But essentially, the GSF is an international organisation that acts as an umbrella group for all major independent and democratic student unions worldwide. So we have more than 190 national and international organizations. So we encompass 6,000 local organizations. And I represent Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. So some of my examples may be a bit more specific towards them, but hopefully there's something that you guys can take away. So the Global Student Forum just released our 2025 gender mainstreaming strategy. And so this sits on 3 pillars. I want to recount them to you, but speak about them from how I see them and how I think we can really involve them in institutions. And the difficulty with a global organization is always that every university operates differently. And when we're here as students and we're talking to students, a lot of it is very campus specific, but we've found these 3 pillars to kind of be the key things that students can work on to ensure that there's gender equality where they are. So the first one comes down to transformative leadership and inclusive governance. And I always mentioned governance tends to be a very dry word and something that students avoid, but the importance of it cannot be understated, in the sense that we found that institutional accountability in exposing gender disparities in university governance has led to the greatest policy reforms. So, for example, in Australia, we held the National Student Safety Survey. So we found that 1 in 6 students since starting university experienced sexual harassment. And so the years of advocacy from the National Union led to the government releasing an action plan addressing gender-based violence in universities, because it was that much of an issue. But it took it being classed as an emergency for actual action to be taken. So essentially things came out of this, such as the National Ombudsman, essentially where students can put forward complaints and policy ideas to this national body, which then can kind of systematically be brought back to universities to collectively work on. And again, I understand this is a very high level kind of change that happened, but this was through a lot of the smaller efforts of recognizing where there was a lack of gender equality and where this gender-based violence was happening. Another thing was a lot of issues when it comes to, say, the bigger issues of as students or universities, is we as students notice these gaps, for example, where when we look at student safety, which was a big focus last year for the Global Student Forum, things like student accommodation was a big issue. A lot of, again, this may be specific, but a lot of university accommodation was outsourced, wasn't being looked after. It wasn't a safe space for students, especially the women. So things like that were, especially, women and non-binary backgrounds. So a lot of these things were worked on as students to be able to create policy change and bring those to the university. So that comes down to institutional accountability. Another thing the Global Student Forum did was launch a global mentorship and leadership pipeline for women. So this was providing direct access to funding, training, and decision-making spaces. This is where I saw the biggest difference myself for a lot of women and women in leadership, was this mentorship. Unfortunately, it slowly gets better, but we have an issue where women are sometimes, and not generalized, afraid to kind of ask for help or put themselves out there when it comes to these really big global organizations and spaces. It's kind of a thing of just being happy to be there sometimes. And this isn't something that, so women, this is something that tends to get internalized, that came out through our research and qualitative research just from the average student leader. So we basically, our goal is to connect students with mentors in their field so they can essentially learn how to make, learn those skills and continue in whatever career path they're going through. The second pillar was challenging systematic barriers and fostering inclusive practices. So this is where an example I'll briefly give is something that is being brought out in universities around Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, which is these things called student partnership agreements. You might have versions thereof in where you guys are located, but this was very novel for us. We might have been a bit behind, but essentially it was almost a non-legal contract, if you will, between students and staff at the university, essentially putting forward key considerations or obligations that they thought were a priority for students and for the staff. And when I say staff, I mean university management in that sense. And for a lot of students, a lot of things we focused on, for example, at my specific university, which is a University of Technology, Sydney, was about the sexual harassment that was happening on campus, the lack of reporting, the difficulty of reporting an incident, and then all those things that come with learning in academia. For example, women in STEM were very, very underrepresented. So something that was done was change the requirements to get into these courses, and this was to speak to equity, not just equality, because women were finding there were certain requirements in Australia that's very difficult for women to meet, especially if you're a mature age student as a woman. So we were able to change those requirements, things like including childcare. I know that was touched on, safe spaces for women. So all these things were included in the student partnership agreement. And for us, it was really leaps and bounds in bringing these things to the forefront, putting them on paper, codifying them, and then over the space of the 3-year agreement, being able to action those. And the last pillar for the Global Student Forum was building alliances and advocacy for systematic change. So as a global organization, a lot of this meant partnering with international bodies. Shout out to UNESCO, which has been of great help as we've collaborated collaborated with them in our respective countries, supporting student movements to mobilize change, and even collaborating with a lot of civil societies to advance all those things we've talked about: parental leave, childcare, work-life balance, women in leadership. And we've put money and resources towards that, as well as allowing for student representation in these spaces. But I will say, in finishing up the 3 pillars and my little part, gender equality, especially for students, isn't just about representation. It's obviously about meaningful participation, the structural change, and ensuring that the institutions that we're in as students reflect the voices that they serve, which is why I can't speak highly enough of genuine and meaningful collaboration with staff. And I think we used to have a saying in the Global Student Forum in the early days that it wasn't a question of if change will come, but how fast it'll happen. However, recent times have shown us that isn't exactly true. We found, more and more in the way things are heading in recent event, change doesn't automatically occur. We're not automatically progressing forward in the way we see it. So since we can't rely simply on time to bring about these improvements, we've made sure that we're proactive in what we do. We've worked with institutions, we've challenged, views, we've challenged even the institutions we're working with on certain views they have, so we can move forward with the change we're hoping to see. And, the pace of our change depends on our collective effort to push for it, not just the passage of time. That's my piece. Thank you.
That's not a small piece either. That's really very important to hear and to listen about all the many different initiatives that you champion. And what is very specific and unique about GSF, the Global Student Forum, is that this opportunity to share practice around the globe through the student unions, and those student unions then work with the university leadership, and how these actually are running in circles to raise awareness, bring the topics to the table, and hopefully help develop these change mechanisms and change practices that are so much needed. But as you say, and as many of the speakers already said, even if change is there, it is not extremely fast, but fast sometimes is also good, because then normally you would expect that the changes that are being implemented will be long lasting, but that's also not a guarantee. As Pamela Gillis said, under her leadership, one situation, she leaves another situation, and how that also, when the leadership changes, what does that mean? And how do you embed change for the years to come and ensure that there is a follow-up? So we're now at the time when we can engage in a conversation also between all of the speakers, because I would imagine that maybe if I give each of you 2 minutes to react to 1 or 2 specific points that you've heard in presentations by other speakers, and how do you see that each of the presentations actually looked at a broad question, which is how should higher education contribute to narrowing the gender and equity gap? And we've heard many examples here, and you may wish to really engage in or highlight something that you've heard in a presentation by one of the other speakers. And here I would like to go reverse and maybe give the floor first to you, Sabrine Yassine, and maybe see between the work that you do at the level of the Global Student Forum, how it can generate dynamics with some of the issues that were raised by the other speakers. So 2 minutes if possible, and then we will rotate and get to the next question. So Sabrine.
Wonderful, thank you. And sorry, I think, I don't know if everyone can see in the chat, but Isabel asked for the Global Student Forum mainstreaming strategy. Unfortunately, I've given you all a little sneaky preview. It's our 2025 one, so it is being released on International Women's Day. You can see it there, but I will send it to Isabel for distribution. But I really think, and I don't say this just meaninglessly, a lot of what all the speakers spoke on were hit straight to heart. They were exactly the type of things we've been looking at as a Global Student Forum. I'm talking about culture shift, I'm talking about taking accountability. And again, even what Anders said, really struck with me just in terms of recent events and the inspiration of it being inspirational in the sense of us needing to speak up and speak out, because, and this comes from a very student perspective, but it is sometimes put your head down and do the work. Systematic change is a bit difficult, especially when you're operating just on your campus, even in your state or your university, your states. So I think there's been a hesitation, especially when you come from students, or if you're in a space for a short period of time, or you're new, not to mess with the status quo. And I mean, this is a very common theme in a lot of different areas, but I think now more than ever, it's so important that we have people speaking up, speaking out, putting the work in collaboration. I know it's not easy, obviously, especially, like I said, if you're a student or new in the spaces, structural change can be very daunting. But I think, and as you mentioned, the idea of being able to share knowledge has been so critical for the Global Student Forum. And I didn't exactly touch on it, but a lot of our work is about almost creating these handbooks for students around the globe, because I'll easily take a bet that something you're working on, whether it be a change, an initiative, a program, a policy, has probably been worked on somewhere else in the world by someone quite similar to you, trying to advocate for very similar things. So this constant communication and collaboration moves us forward a lot faster, especially as students. And if I can speak plainly, sometimes those resistant to change depend on us not communicating. And we find that as students, because these things are difficult, these things are hard. Even, for example, the student partnership agreement, I'll briefly touch on. Me speaking about it to you today, it sounds quite simple, potentially. It sounds like, a collaborative agreement. But for us, it was a year in the making of critiques such as, if you do this agreement, what's it going to do more than sit on the shelf? Or if you do this agreement, you're going to hand the management all the power instead of the students. And it's obviously coming from a student. These things like that are very easy, that if you're not willing to kind of back in what you're trying to achieve, or I guess put your head down and continue the work and stand by what you're working towards in the face of potentially heavy criticism and hurdles, it's not going to happen. So, I didn't touch on anything too specific, but I think the general discussion really speaks to everything that we're working on.
Thank you very much. So Anders Söderholm, I give you the floor.
So thank you all for your contribution. I think it was a good overview in terms of covering both these more general opinions on the need that is here right now, but also giving examples of portfolios of activities that could be organized in order to achieve some progress. I think one thing that we are sort of struggling with is doing, on one hand side, trying to widening the participation to close the gender gap in terms of faculty and students. And the other thing is, while having this gender gap, being inclusive on campus for those groups that are in minority. And these are two very different topics and different approaches. And I think several of the things that you were saying sort of address them, both of these issues. But I think we find it much more easier in a way to work with inclusion on campus than to actually have some progress in terms of widening participation. And addressing the participation issues at the time of recruitment of new faculty members, at the time of when high school graduates make their choice of education, is too late. And I find it very difficult to reach out to the community, to touch them or to communicate earlier in the educational stage or in the professional career. But I think we had a lot of good examples and also, I guess, experiences on things that maybe could make a difference also in that aspect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Reach out to the community and when to start, very important points as well, in order to trigger this transformation that is needed. What are the challenges and yet the opportunities? And a few years back, we saw many more opportunities, and now we see maybe more challenges coming our way. It's interesting to note that the high-level political forum this year in New York will actually review the advancements specifically on SDG 5, and the IAU is strongly committed to participate also with EWORA and with the lead of our SDG 5 subcluster, the University of Bologna. So we want to there also ensure that the higher education voice and all the different stakeholders, including students, have a say at the table when discussing the advancements on the SDG 5 and what that means also for this very large sector in itself. So I now give the floor to you, Shingarande, 2 minutes to react maybe to something that you heard that your fellow speakers raised and where it echoes or challenges where you work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Ahilij. I think collaboration is quite critical, including, of course, a multi-stakeholder approach. I would say, for example, in the case of Zimbabwe, when we want to promote women in STEM at university level, it becomes difficult, or we can only do so much, because much of what needs to happen in terms of conscientizing the girls on the career path they would want to follow, and the subject combination happens at primary and secondary level. So it's quite important that there is collaboration between higher and tertiary education institutions and primary and secondary ones. Then from university level, they're supposed to go into the labor market, for example. So if the labor market is not gender responsive, it would mean all the efforts that higher education institutions would have made would actually go futile. So it's also important that the infrastructure within industry is also gender responsive. So that multi-stakeholder approach is quite important, including at family and community level. That gender awareness is also quite important. So what is required is collaboration amongst the different stakeholders so that we are able to realize the goals that we want to achieve when it comes to gender equality and women empowerment. So it's not only a responsibility for higher education institutions, but it's everybody's responsibility. And I guess the issue of policy as well, might have very good policies, but we also need to ensure implementation or enforcement of those policies. For example, when it comes to anti-sexual harassment, there's lots that's happening in our institutions regarding sexual harassment. And we could actually be having policies or anti-sexual harassment policies in place, but when it comes to implementation and enforcement of those policies, that's where we have gaps. So we need to ensure we have a conducive policy and environment, but also ensure implementation of those policies. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. These are key points. And earlier on, Pamela Gillis, before giving you the floor, you draw our attention to the work of MCO, the Magna Carta Observatory, and the values work there. And when it comes to translating policy into action, their living labs are very strong and allow to move very fast. There's a strong connect between the Magna Carta Observatory and the International Association of Universities. For instance, it's with the Magna Carta that we drafted the letter of consent of universities when joining the IAU. They have to sign a letter to agree on a set of values in order to ensure there is value-based leadership in institutions. But there again, we make them sign a document. It's like a policy. We need to put in place mechanisms to also follow through, as Shingarande said, and see where then from there you go and see to the implementation. So Pamela Gillis, what would you like to pick up from your fellow speakers as well, or maybe pick up some of the points you made and re-emphasize them here?
Okay, and love to pick up on what Sabrine was talking about in relation to the importance and power of the student voice, the young voices in our community, and that student partnership that we had at Glasgow Caledonian University, the University for the Common Good, was essential in creating that impactful campaign I mentioned, Erase the Grey, against sexual-based violence and harassment. 1 in 3 women around the world will experience sexual-based violence or harassment in their lifetime. 1 in 3. And it's even more in certain countries that are facing war and famine and so on. But however, working together in partnership on campaigns like that actually created a bond of trust between staff and students in our university. And so when COVID hit, it was very easy for me to invite our student leaders onto the executive team for our daily meetings to make decisions about how the university would respond to that dreadful pandemic. And it led me working with our former Chancellor, who was Muhammad Yunus, who's now leading Bangladesh. It led me to reflect on the importance of trusting young voices. Look at the pro-democracy revolution in Bangladesh, led by students, and how the wonderful Muhammad Yunus immediately said, join our interim executive team to see if we can reform our nation, young student leaders. And my goodness, that partnership has been tricky. It's not easy to make change happen, as Sabrine said. It takes time. There have been ups and downs. But by working together and joining our voices together, I feel that we can be much more impactful. As Anders said, let's be bold. And I often wonder why we have these fabulous organisations like One Young World, inviting student leaders from across the world to come and engage across a vast array of subjects and topics, why we can't join up our universities to those kinds of One Young World networks, driving change and listening to different voices, which is really important. But I've really enjoyed listening to our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pamela. I would like to give the floor to you, Laura, and then also invite Kirsten Tam next to react to the different presentations before we get to the next question. So Laura, 2 minutes to you as well.
Thank you very much, and I must say I am so inspired after listening to all of you, and this is really impressive work. On my side, when I was hearing to all of you, I really thought how interesting this like proactive approach is. So it's not only reacting, but actually really like proactive and also thinking on the long term and only like short-term results, which I think is really key. Also, I completely join what Pamela just said and Sabrine about joining voices. And also I think like creating a community is just so important because we're just stronger together, right? And in our case at UNESCO, we really saw it because there is this L'Oréal UNESCO program where we also give endowments to PhDs and postdocs, but we don't stop there. We actually have a community platform online, like it's a website where they can all join this platform. And on this platform, they have access to, for example, like leadership programs, management, negotiation, coachings. They can also exchange between themselves. There is a forum. So it's also, I feel like what we saw is that people want to talk, people want to exchange, people want to learn from each other, and also just develop soft skills together as a team. And that's something that we really saw has been in demand and worked. So again, it's raising voices, community building, and we're stronger together.
Thank you very much. Yes, this notion of partnerships and how difficult it is, Pamela stressed it as well, and Sabrine, and there is this strong need for these collaborative approaches to what we do, sharing the stories, make them also very strong, these stories, so that they are replicable, understandable, scalable in a way. There's one thing that, and I gave the floor to Laura quickly, and for your important points that you made. One point, Pamela Gillis, you mentioned twice, erase the gray. Can you explain maybe a little bit further what that is? It's a bit gray to me, and it may be for for our audience as well. So maybe you could explain that concept. Yeah.
You can certainly find it online if you just know, Google it. It'll come up. So it was a campaign. It was a campaign where young student voices, male and female, were talking about how difficult it is sometimes to resist inappropriate advances from staff or students or anyone in the community, that we actually mean what we say, and we need to erase the grey areas of debate about consent or otherwise. And it was extremely powerful because it opened up the whole university community and the wider community. It was adopted by Police Scotland, would you believe? It opened up safe spaces to talk about difficult issues and where no means no. And what are the grey areas, how to resist violence. It was very powerful because most of the voices were coming from the students themselves and their personal stories. So they brought their stories alive through this particular campaign.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is very important, and yes, we will put some links also in the chat. Important for this is a direct link to the work that Sabrina Seen was mentioning at the beginning. These international and student safety surveys, the gender-based violence activities on campus. So it's linked to all that. Thank you. Kirsten, I'm sure you have plenty of things that you would like to also hear. Look, in the meantime, I will ask all the speakers to prepare maybe one or two points you would like to bring in on the next question to address all the different issues that we've been talking about. Do you see a role for inter and multidisciplinary approaches in higher education when addressing the issue of gender equity, gender equality opportunities? So that will be the next question, but Kirsten Tam, to you.
Thank you very much. And it has been wonderful to listen to all the different voices and perspectives on this a very important question we are discussing. And a few reflections from more focusing on the importance of the top leadership of the universities. It could be what Anders said. There is time now to be critical and to raise our voices, the top leadership, and there's right now we are silent, and of course we are dependent also on the politicians and so on, but we are very strong in what we do at the universities, and so we should really continue with working with what we do with preventing sexual harassment, promoting gender equality, inclusion, and so but we should really debate on this and go together, and that is very strong, and I really learned a lot about your discussions about this, and also that we have perhaps the top leadership, we have a more important role now to transform the academic culture really, and comprising strategies for what we are talking about here, and values-led leadership, also integrating and focusing also on academic values, democratic principles, human rights, and sustainability, aspects of sustainability. So I think at the different kinds of national arenas for vice chancellors, rectors, I think we need to discuss this. I know that we are doing that, and especially academic freedom, but we also need to clarify what we do at the universities and the importance of it. And we also need, as Pamela said, to involve the boards of the universities. So this was a few things that I think, and by sharing stories like this, I think we will become stronger and together. And so collaboration between universities, but also what was said about the importance of gender awareness in society, since we are educating, for example, school teachers. We need to continue the discussions with our alumni working in society, and to involve them in collaboration between different stakeholders in society. And finally, the students are the future and future change makers. So let us, I know that students have other things to think about, also their studies and so on, but we need to really understand the importance of involving students in management, but of course also in different ways at the universities and in society. So that was some reflections.
Yeah, very interesting. Very important point also when we need to combine these discussions with alum. And this may be one of the responses to the point made by Shingarande earlier, how to make the labor market responsive as well to everything that's happening in the other levels of education. Indeed, if you prepare the change throughout the education periods and pathways of students, and then they come to the labor market is not ready. That is definitely something that can be probably tackled also through discussions with alum. So to this other question, what kind of other mechanisms, also when it comes to different kinds of approaches to research, would inter and multidisciplinary approaches to the higher education mechanism when it comes to teaching and learning and or research, would that be a trigger for change? Anders, would you maybe take that question, and does it resonate in particular in a university like yours, where there is a strong focus on the STEM, and then how to also bring in other disciplines in order to bring about the change that is so much needed?
Yes, I think it's a fundamental thing to have a multidisciplinary approach. Even though you are a specialist in your area, designing materials for nuclear plants or components for autonomous vehicles, you need to understand how what you do connects to a wider environment. And that is true both for sustainability issues as well as for gender issues. And I think we come very far in terms of having sustainability as a basis for multidisciplinary approaches in all our areas, basically, but coming less far when it comes to include gender issues as a way to seek multidisciplinary approaches. But for example, in the AI research field that is so much growing now, if you work with machine learning and language models, you need to understand what kind of biases that you have in the models that you create. And to do that, you need to cooperate with researchers coming from other areas. And also, when designing various things in for example, vehicles, you need to understand how they could be used by all kind of different body types, for example. And also, again, you need to cooperate. For life science, it's so obvious that when you design new drugs, you have traditionally done the clinical tests in a very narrow segment of the populations, again, in order to understand how to be a more precise and a more a better drug developer. You need to include other areas as well. So I think it's one thing that is fundamental for especially maybe for STEM research areas to seek those cooperations with other areas.
Yes, thank you very much. Pamela, I see you on my screen now, and then Sunungurai, and then I will move to Sabrine and to Laura.
Okay. Yes, I totally agree with Anders, because the evidence, and I'm an epidemiologist, so I love data and evidence, but the evidence shows that multidisciplinary papers are more likely to be authored by women. And women are the majority of academic researchers on some of the UN's SDGs, including gender equality, reducing inequalities, peace and justice. So I think it's extremely important in our universities, in order for us to actually solve very, very complex problems, that we develop research centres and institutes of excellence that are intrinsically interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, because otherwise we're never going to be able to solve these tremendously complex problems that we all face. And many of these multidisciplinary centres, and I'll go back to my old friend Mohammed Yunus, who founded the Grameen Bank, but he also, in an academic sense, has supported the development of Yunus centres around the world, which are actually focusing on participatory, community-based, multidisciplinary, it's a difficult word, research processes involving the participants, the members of the local community, in drafting questions and telling us what they need and what they want us to research in an objective and scientific way. So these centres they have to be beacons of excellence. This is not anything other than focusing on excellent research, but in this multidisciplinary model that I think we all need, and that has been slow to develop. But look at women's leadership in that area. I find that really quite interesting.
Thank you very much. We see, however, with the many challenges also to the budgets of universities, that what goes out first is the multidisciplinary approach, because we go back to disciplines is easier to document, it's easier to bring to ranking mechanisms, etc. And the inter and multidisciplinary approaches, I'm a fond believer and defender. I'm by education and professor of comparative literature, where all of that comes into play. So always try to put that into practice at the different universities where I taught, but I saw the resistance. It's incredibly difficult. So from a student perspective, where do you see a future that would also embrace inter and multidisciplinarity more strongly? Is that a topic that you came across, something you would like to pick up as well in this conversation? Sabrine.
Yes, it is. I think everyone's touched on in terms of, interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, giving you a more holistic understanding. Things aren't confined to one domain, it intersects with various factors, various fields. I think that's something we're definitely aware of in students. I mean, the main example I can think of is that around a lot of student groups, or even student activist groups or that involved, tend to be quite siloed. For example, at the Global Student Forum, we had an Indigenous working group, a women's working group, genderqueer working group, the climate group, and these were international working groups, and you had like a chair of the group and the members. And then we realized one day that none of them were talking to each other. Everyone was doing their own thing because they were passionate about that specific issue, which of course makes sense. But we had all these fantastic working groups doing amazing things, writing policy for their area, distributing it to universities around the world, but none of them actually had anything to do with each other. And we would hear about it on the steering committee because they'd come to us, but they weren't discussing. So I think that was one of the clearest examples I can remember where we were like, oh, actually, we need to work together. The only way we're going to improve, get better, and talked about all these innovative solutions that we've been discussing is by interdisciplinary work. So I think things like that, we've made sure from that example to be able to implement that in all the ways in which we now advocate and represent students.
Thank you very much. Sunungurai, would you like to pick up on this topic as well? And then I will give the floor to you, Laura.
Yes, Hilij, I just wanted to say what's also important is capacity strengthening in the relevant methodologies for inclusion, such as the feminist methodology, and also ensuring that the voices of women are amplified. There's lots that that can be said that has not been documented from the perspective of women. So the amplification of women's voices is also quite critical when we're talking about research and women. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A very important point indeed, this strengthening in methodologies, and then how they connect. The point that Sabrine makes, you can have many groups working, but then if they still don't talk to each other, do we really then trigger that change? So Laura, then Kirsten, and then we will have a little bit less than 10 minutes left to address one of the questions that was asked in the chat. You may have seen how in the current political context around the world, and that many challenges that Anders was highlighting, that every one of you actually highlighted in different ways in your presentations. So that next question will be, how do you see that we can make sure that we are not being silenced, but speak up and make the difference also for the future? So first, Laura, then Kirsten, and then that will be in 1 minute, your opportunity to address that question as well before we will have to close this very important conversation. So Laura.
Thank you, and I fully agree with everything that has been said for this for this question. Indeed, I think, I mean, we know that gender disparities come from multiple factors, right? Whether it's like cultural norms, institutional biases, policy gaps, etc. So I feel like as it comes from so many different factors, we also need to take like this multidisciplinary approach. And I think it's really indeed important, just like mixing, for example, if we talk about STEM fields, but also social sciences, policy research. Again, we all have different perspectives. By bringing them together that we can actually, you know, find more target solutions. And for example, even at UNESCO, I'm part of the natural sciences sector, but on this topic, I have meetings every week with colleagues from social sciences sector, from education sector, and then we have like all these priorities around us, indigenous people, small island developing states, and we really talk on a weekly basis. And even within the natural sciences sector, within my team, we all have a different background. I have a different background in international relations, my colleague in natural sciences, epidemiology as well, someone else in interpretation, someone else in economics. And I feel like that's really how we're moving, you know, forward. Is just we all have different interests, different backgrounds, different expertise. And that's how we can actually bridge the different gaps. So fully, I think it's important in the workplace, but also in higher education.
Thank you. Kirsten?
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot on multidisciplinarity and the importance of that, because at Malmö University, where I were the former rector or vice chancellor, all education and research were interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. And we discussed a lot about that multidisciplinary research is needed right now if we really want to address and solve the complex global challenges we are facing right now, like we have discussed here today, the climate, health, democracy, gender equality, diversity and inclusion, and etc. So we need also now, I think, to work more on quality measurements of multidisciplinary research, good indicators, because it's very difficult to assess the quality of multidisciplinary research. So that is one thing we need and to do to work on, I think. So thank you.
Yes, indeed, this is a very key point, assessment, recognition, and then being able to show what you did in order to advance in your academic career. That's often where, indeed, on the one hand, Pamela, you said that multidisciplinary papers are mostly written and championed by women, and yet then their research is less recognized because there are no mechanisms to recognize it properly in the career advancement processes at universities in too many countries around the world. So time is short. We have 5 minutes left before we will wrap up and close this very important webinar, which we hope will travel far. The question in the chat was from Iris Werner, Gender Equality Commissioner from Kiel University in Germany. And she was wondering, also listening to all of you, how to defend achievements in gender equality against political shifts towards far-right parties in too many countries, I would say. Who would like to start and maybe respond to this? Difficult. Shall I appoint someone? Anders, you had a few comments there already in your initial presentation, so maybe you you can in 1 minute recall those.
Could you just say it again? I had some problems with the sound exactly when you were.
Okay, so Iris Werner, Gender Equality Commissioner from Kiel University, is asking how to defend achievements in gender equality when political shifts towards the far right are actually challenging many of these advancements.
I think this is it's a true challenge right now. We are seeing what is happening right now today in the United States under the new administration, and I know that our colleagues in the States are, in doubt whether they should speak out or not, or whether they would lose their job if they do or not. So I think this is it is a question that is of highest importance, but also very, very difficult. In our countries, maybe it's easier in the way that it's okay to speak up. So I think that is what we should do, and not only for our own universities, but for the sector as such, on a global scale. So I think our voices are needed even more now than in the past, and it's more needed in those countries where the challenge is not silencing us right now, but it may be so in the future to come. So it comes back to what I said initially, that this is the time to actually stand firm.
Thank you. Pamela, would you like to come next? Also, you took the example of the women leadership in the US, 6, not even a year ago, only 3 left now, and the challenge is there. I would cite other examples from many other countries in Africa where the government is taking Trump-like action and just removing women leaders from universities and replacing them just because they're women. So it's interesting what's happening nowadays.
Yeah, as Anders says, we need to speak boldly. We need probably to take some more strategic control of certain aspects of artificial intelligence and the platforms on which lies are told. We need to respond to those lies with truths. And of course, there are many different kinds of truths, but we need to take more control of those stories and respond to them. But as universities, I agree with Anders, we have convening power. That's one thing we have. And of course, we're ever more powerful the more of us join together to raise our voices. But what's happened in the United States has been absolutely disgraceful. And it's easy for me to say, I have recently retired as a Vice-Chancellor. I feel quite happy to speak boldly. It's much more difficult for some of our colleagues. So those of us who have the ability to speak out should be doing so. And at EWORA, as Kirsten has said, we are really interested in making our voices loudly heard in this arena.
Thank you very much. Sunungurai, would you like to come in?
Yeah, but not much. Just to say, to reiterate the point earlier made about value-based leadership. I guess it's quite important when we're discussing about sustainability of the achievements that we have registered. We need value-based leadership, and that can actually propel the achievements forward. Thank you.
Thank you
so the
so
leadership, that value-based leadership across not only in our education institutions, but across all our institutions and sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, very important points. Sabrine, Laura, and Kirsten, maybe you would wish to close. Sabrine.
I can briefly speak to this. I'll say that, students, as Pamela mentioned, it's a bit easier for us to speak up, speak out, and we have been at the forefront of a lot of, these issues, mobilizing, educating, which is what we really need to do, because we all know public opinion can be a very, very powerful tool in defending gender equality. And I think bringing people along with us, clearly communicating, why we're fighting for things we're fighting, because it is a worrying trend. And as a young person, we're all concerned, but, what starts in the US tends to start a trend, and obviously things are shifting a bit now, but that makes us think forward into the future, how are we going to protect these things that we've fought for so far. So I guess we will see where it goes. I am hopeful, but again, I think staff supporting students in this fight, students supporting staff, and working together, we can continue to make progress.
Thank you so much. So Laura, before I give you the floor, I would like to also say to all those who have been with us that the recording of this webinar will be made available online, both on the EWORA website and on the IAU website, for you to listen back into the conversation and the important points made. And also, I would like to already thank Isabel Thoman and Julia from EWORA for their strong commitment, and Puangan Duong, who's undertaking a very great internship with us, for being with us here and for facilitating the organization of this event. So without further ado, Laura, and then Kirsten, it will be up to you. So Laura.
I mean, I think everything was said. The only thing I can emphasize is indeed just those who are given the opportunity, and then also which tools do we have to actually communicate to like a large public. I think like now on our case here, we really tried in the past 3 weeks to use social media to try to reach, you know, a maximum audience. We launched this campaign with the hashtag Every Voice in Science, which, you know, was launched 11th of February. So it was kind of when everything was happening and starting. And we saw that it reached 26 million people were reached through this hashtag in 2 weeks. So I think this social media really is a tool to also just communicate to different audiences, different generations as well, depending on which social media platform. But we need to be innovative, I think, in the way we're thinking in the next month. But I'm hopeful as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Kirsten, I see people will have to leave. Yeah, we're just a little bit over time. And thank you.
So thank you all of you, the audience, and the speakers, of course, and International Association of Universities for this very inspiring webinar. And I'm sure that I feel myself that I've learned a lot, and I have also got new insights, and so I feel very glad, and would like to say thank you very, very much for today, and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers and for your excellent points.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goodbye.